Hi, my name is Jonathan Hicks, and today I'm joined by
Mark.
Steve.
and we've just finished playing Halla Tao, which is an Uwe Rosenberg game about, yep, you guessed it, farming. This one, though, is quite different from Agricola. So if you're thinking, oh, it's just another Agricola, it's really not. So let me sort of talk you through how it plays. Typically, this is the worker placement board. And all these blue cubes are different people's workers, but it doesn't matter whose workers they are. They basically block the space. If you want to take this action here, which will get you some crops and milk or wool, or this can extend the life of your sheep, then you have to put one worker on because that's the bottom space. But the next person who goes and wants to take this action has to put 2 workers there. And then if someone else wants to go there, they have to put 3 workers there. And then after that, like this space here, it's blocked. No one can do this plant 3 of their fields thing. But at the start of every round, you remove the top row of each of the action spaces. So this comes off, like Steve is doing. Oops. That's right, and this comes off. So you're going to be left with some spaces, but the more popular the spaces are, the more expensive it's then going to be on the next round. So it's tricky. You have to think quite carefully about where you're going to go, because if you can be going to spots where other people don't want to go, I guess it's like any worker placement game. But the removing the workers thing and not removing all the workers, it's very interesting. So most of these spaces are going to get you stuff, and you're tracking your stuff on your board here. So for instance, this is rye, and it's on the 2 spot. That means I've got 2 rye. I've got 3 flax, I think that was. I've got 5 milk. So these just kind of track your resources. You're also getting fields. Some of these spaces will allow you to acquire fields. This gets you a field here. And the important thing about the fields is the row that they're on. So if I were to take that spot and get a new field on row 2, that's the 2. So you can put it anywhere on row 2, but you can't put it in the space where there's like a column of another field. So I can't put it here, but I could go there, or there, or there, or there. When you plant the goods, so some of these actions, like we saw here, let you plant goods in the fields. So I could spend one of my rye to then take a rye thing and put it in the field. Maybe I'll put it in this one here. When it comes to harvest time, the empty fields that have been left fallow will sort of become more fertile, and they will all move up one. Any field where you planted, though, harvests, and you harvest the row that it's on. So if having planted it in this one, it means it's going to be worth 5 rye when I harvest it. But if I'd planted it in this one, it would only be worth 4. So the higher up they are, the more valuable they are. But after you've harvested from a field, it moves down. So the ones you use move down, the ones you don't use move up. So there's interesting kind of up and down with the different fields as to sort of how fertile they are and how many crops you're going to get out of them. So that's typically how you're going to get crops. You can also go to spaces to get sheep. So sheep from here or here, for instance. You also get other products like there's meat and there's hide and things. But your sheep go on this farm board here. Now each round you kind of track through rounds 1, 2, 3, and then underneath here is round 4, 5, and 6. So if we've just finished round 3, you start off by revealing the next card. When you acquire sheep in round 1, it goes on this card. Sheep in this round go on this card. But when you get to round 4, any sheep that are on here kind of die of old age and they go away. And this is a card that at the end of the round you're going to get sort of acquire, which is going to go into a hand of cards, because something else you can do in the game is go to these sort of corner spots. Like if you put 2 workers here, you can take this card here. And the cards, there's quite a lot. You can see the sort of tableau of cards we've been building throughout the game. This says if I have 1, 2, 4, or 6 fields of level 5, then I can immediately plant fields. So this is like a condition. As soon as you met the condition, you get this stuff. Other sorts of cards you can get, you have to spend things. So if you spend jewellery, you can get a couple of extra fields. There is a track that tracks how many jewels you have. I'll explain why that is important later. If you have 3 flax and 3 wool, this just gets you a tool. But if you spend 3 cards from your hand, then this gets you another kind of card. Or again, spending a jewellery, you get to use an action space. Some cards give you income. So this one with a little 3 here means that at the start of every round, effectively, you're going to get another card. Or this one at the start of every round, I'm going to get a field on row 3. So the card's quite important, and there'll be some cards, if you get down to this bottom space here, that will give you lots of endgame scoring points. So at the end of the game, if I had accumulated 4 jewels, I could spend them to get 12 points, or I could spend all of my 8 fields, kind of use them up, dig them all up, and that would get me 13 points. So the cards is quite an important part of the game. There's 2 main ways you're getting points in this game, and one main way is by getting the cards. A lot of cards are simply worth points on them anyway, so you can see this is worth 3 points, this one is worth 6 points. So you're trying to get cards and have the goods and the stuff to be able to play them, and then obviously get the points as well as the bonuses. And lastly, the main other thing you do in this game It's this kind of cottage thing, which does two things. So first of all, whatever the number is visible in the window is how many workers you get at the start of the round. You just kind of take however many cubes you need, and then obviously in the worker placement section of the game, you're spending the workers in turn order to put them on the spaces and get the stuff. And you want to be able to advance this cottage to the right, because as it moves to the right, you can see these are the lower numbers. It's kind of revealing higher numbers of workers you're going to get each round. How do you do that? Well, you need to move these buildings, and the buildings require you to spend resources. And the number of resources you spend depends on the round. So if it were round 4, if we just revealed this, you would need to spend 4 goods to move this one space to the right. And the carpentry requires you to spend more clay than rye. So if I have 4, I've only got 1 clay and 1 rye here. Oh no, I actually got 5 plus 1 would be 6 rye. But if I had enough clay, I could spend 3 clay, let's say, and 1 rye, and then it would slide 1 space to the right. And as you advance these buildings, as soon as there's a gap here, the cottage slides magically along the ground and reveals the next number here. So now I'm getting 11 workers each round instead of 10. They're going to hit the boulders though. You can see there are boulders on here. You can acquire tools. That's one of the things you get in the game. And you can kind of exhaust these tools to push the boulders along. So I'd have to spend 1 tool to put that to there. I could spend another tool to put that there. And then I can spend the goods to kind of, again, slide these over in the hope of revealing more of these. And if you slide it far enough, not only do you get more workers, you get points. So that's going to give me 18 points at the end of the game. So trying to slide this along, you can see you can actually get potentially up to 70 points if you slide your cottage far enough in this part of the game. So as I say, points are coming mainly from cards and points, and it's interesting because Steve and I took very different strategies in this game. You also get a few points for sheep at the end of the game, so you're trying to accumulate sheep. If you get sheep in rounds 4, 5 or 6, they kind of go to the stable and they're safe. They won't die of natural causes until after the game has ended, fortunately. All right, what do we think?
Just to reiterate the first thing Jonathan said, this feels nothing like Agricola, and that's a good thing, because we don't need another Agricola. The worker placement spots in this are much looser than that. I mean, they do fill up over time. So particularly towards the end of the game, you would be in situations where there may only be one of the spaces available to take once, because they had the 2 rows lower already taken. But for a large portion of the game, you could generally take a spot, but you might have to pay a bit extra worker-wise. It balances nicely between the main board scoring and the card scoring. I think you need to do both, because the cards often combo to some extent and give you points. I don't think you can ignore either of them if you want to win. It doesn't feel as much like farming as Agricola. It does kind of feel like just doing some things, and there are loose connections, but you don't get that full. Agricola felt much more like farming than this, basically. It does say on the box expert level. I don't think it was an especially complex teach, or even that generally like overly complex to play. It's mine's more like Fields of Arle than like your Caverna, your Agricola said, your Feast for Odin, which have many more systems all going on at the same time. This is a little bit cleaner than those. The biggest complexity, like I say, is probably just making sure you combo the cards well. But yeah, it's very good.
Steve?
Yeah, there's 2 main ways, the house and the cards, and I was effectively forced down the card route. I went last first round, and in my first round I played one of my cards that allowed me to generate an income of fields, and so I went down an income route, so I picked up more cards, because by the time it got to me, I'm like, well, no one's picking cards up, I'll pick cards up and do it. And in doing so, I didn't move my house along quick enough, so in future rounds I wasn't getting as many workers as these guys. I only got 12 workers on the last round of the game. These guys had 12 workers from round 4 or 5 onwards, I think. And so I needed to make sure I was going first, and the way to make sure you're going first is to pick cards up. And so I wasn't taking the expensive spots because I couldn't have the workers, and I went down the card route. But cards get you income as well. So I had 13 cards that gave me income, and they all scored a modicum of points. And then I picked up some scoring cards. Now, it has the downside of drawing a card late in the game that you can't fulfill. You've wasted an action doing so. So picking the cards up early and going towards those is probably the way to go. If you try and think, oh brilliant, it's the last round, I'm going first, I will pick up a scoring card, and then it's saying have 8 tools and you've only got 2, or have no empty fields and you've just planted, or whatever like that. So drawing cards on top of the deck, I did have, even though I was picking a lot of cards up and I had a lot of stuff, I had 4 cards at the end of the game that I was nowhere near doing, and that's 4 actions or 4 kind of subsidiary actions that I've picked those cards up and can't do. Other than that, if it didn't have those cards, it would feel quite bland. It would feel like a kind of churning resources, picking spots up on the boards. That balance between the bonuses and the collecting the stuff for the cards and collecting the stuff for the house, collecting the tools and the jewelry and stuff like that. Yeah, it's got a couple of different strategies, and it feels like a pretty solid game.
Rating?
8 out of 10.
I think I give it 7.5.
Okay. I really enjoyed it. Very much agree with everything they've said. Doesn't feel like a Agricola, not as heavy. So it's everything kind of makes sense and it's easy to play through. The rules, I must say, were well written, and the nice little round summary means you can play through each of the different phases of the round quite smoothly. And it's just very satisfying, either in terms of the cards, the ability to combo. One card gets you this other thing, which is just a requirement, which lets you get something else, but then you can spend that to get this other card, and they kind of chain really satisfactorily. In terms of advancing your cottage, sliding that along, again, that feels really good because you're getting more and more workers every round, every time you do that, and so you've got more powerful turns. But then if people are going for the spots that you really want, if you're having to spend 3 workers, so what if you've got 2 extra workers that more than other people, you're using so many workers on the actions that you really want. So you do have to pay attention to what other people are doing, like any worker placement game, I guess, to avoid doing the same kinds of strategies as those. I really, really enjoyed this one. It was a nice, not too heavy, but gave me enough to think about, so I was fully engaged all the way through. I've got a 9 out of 10. I thought it was fantastic. All right, thanks very much for watching. That was Halla Tao.